code on this computer. Okie dokie then. Everybody awake? Take that as a yes. There are 14 of you here, different states of awareness. That means we get to go backwards. Think about what we learned yesterday. Let's see. I'll put this together for you. Put that together, and I put that versus that and that. Somatic. Versus VS. I don't know how that actually became an abbreviation. VS. Let's go. Tank. I wonder if you guys ever get the feeling that this is definitely much more enjoyable for me than it is for you. Am I recording this yet? We are. Yay, fantastic. Okay, so who wants to walk me through this? Anybody? So, admit all. Okay. Nobody? I'm sorry?
Good morning.
Hey, what's up, man?
Hey, what's up?
Too much. It's just about like a general question. You're taking a look at like the cartoon here. Imagine, if you will, you were trying to teach it to, oh, I don't know, my 9-year-old niece. What would you tell her aside from, go away, kid, I hate your uncle?
Is that the autonomic versus the somatic?
Yes, it is. Kick ass.
Is the the autonomic, isn't it like constantly working to like maintain balance, and then I haven't started chapter 15 yet. I'm gonna make a comparison.
Dude, it sounds like you went out partying this past weekend and you didn't survive Monday, and you're just gonna try to rush to catch up here. Okay, but yeah,
I'm gonna catch up today.
That's okay. Cool. Just get it done. You know, ideally by the end of this week, because you will. This is what's going to end up happening, right? If yesterday was chapter 15, and what we did is we broke down what pre-ganglionic and post-ganglionic neurons did in the autonomic nervous system, right? Where we're going to release acetylcholine here. We're going to release norepinephrine here. Remember that they act antagonistically on 3 major target tissues, and those are glands, cardiac muscle tissue, and then smooth muscle. And remember, smooth muscle's found everywhere. And one of the things I was hoping somebody who was reading last night said, oh, we target the heart in a couple of different ways. And even though this seems like a digression, it's actually not. Think about the fact that glands actually have smooth muscle. Think about the fact that heart, even though it's made up of cardiac muscle tissue, the blood vessels that supply it are constructed with smooth muscle tissue. So even though your textbook teaches you as though it's this neat little breakdown of where you're going to find the receptors, remember, in many tissues you'll have different receptors on each of those different targets depending upon what part of the target we are actually, wait for it, targeting. So then hopefully what you were thinking about last night is, well, so how does Mother Nature sort of clarify all of this? And she clarifies it by making sure that you guys go learn the difference between a muscarinic receptor and a nicotinic receptor. I said this is where we would pick up last class, so that's exactly where we're at. Okay, number 1, number 2, here's alpha 1, here's alpha 2. Notice I'm teaching it differently today. Beta 1, beta 2, forget about beta 3 because we don't care about it anymore. But the idea, of course, is generally speaking, muscarinic receptors were inhibitory and nicotinic receptors were excitatory. And notice what I'm doing here. Alpha 1, beta 1 generally were excitatory, and alpha 2 and beta 2 generally are inhibitory. So last night, or yesterday, oh my God. So yesterday, at the end of class, I said I wanted you to go look through those tables and see if anything actually sort of popped out at you to sort of strike you as odd as to what Mother Nature was doing. And one of the examples, of course, I actually walked through class with you with was a subset of glands. Now, I said nudge, nudge, hint, hint, wink, wink at that point in time. You probably want to pay attention to this because it is one of the examples that's given sort of regularly to make sure that people understand that even though you can take a look at the, and let's see if I can put this whole thing under one umbrella. I can't there, right? Let's do this. This is all motor output. Okay? Even though you're targeting all of these tissues for motor output, what motor output actually means is the effector is actually doing the work. So when you think about the final exam and you start to cry, right? The glands in your eyes, the lacrimal glands, okay, will have smooth muscle as well as secretory properties that will actually have to be regulated, okay? So it's actually, it's when you think about what's being organized here, it's actually kind of intricate, but the textbook makes it seem really straightforward. And part of the reason why they have to do that is they haven't told you actually where all of the stimulating sensations are arising from. And this is going to segue now into closing off chapter 15, but we come back to it again later in the week, and figuring out how it is, if this is our first order neuron, and remember this is a unipolar neuron who has its cell bodies inside the dorsal root ganglia, signals to a second order neuron, which is going to synapse most of the time at the thalamus to activate a third order neuron, which will then activate your primary somatosensory cortex. So primary somatosensory PSS cortex. Okay. Woohoo! So what does this actually mean to detect something? Okay. What we're going to do now is we're going to segue into chapter 16. And today we're going to focus on just the sensation piece. Okay, how do you actually sense the outside world inside chapter 16? Because you're going to see we spent a great deal of time figuring out what it means for Mother Nature to decorate your body with different types of receptors, which might sound kind of weird to say out loud and maybe even think about. But the fact that you can hear me right now, I mean, think about it. I'm talking into a screen. It's attached to a series of electrons. It's sending information, and your speakers are sending that information out to you. And what's actually happening there is you're deviating sound waves in the atmosphere that strike your tympanic membrane that cause a series of sensations inside the vestibular cochlear nerve, of which the cochlear portion is now interpreting that information. And maybe you've closed your eyes because you're like, I can't stand the sound of this person's voice anymore. Okay, you just need to kill the pain somehow, so you're already drinking straight gin with your coffee. Okay, the idea is that somewhere along the way, Mother Nature needed to figure out which different receptors needed to be placed at unique locations. I got a question. You're like, stop talking. 1 second. Oh, gotcha. Okay. So let's do something with this. You share. Let's go over here. Chapter 16. Lots of
Wait. I'm sorry. I know.
Where are you? I can't see you. There you are. She's like, I don't want to see you, man. I can't take it anymore. Don't worry, you only got like 3 weeks to go.
But blah, blah.
Okay.
Can you repeat what you said? Mother Nature asks
where to put unique sensory receptors to collect that specific, we're going to just call it sensation at this point in time. Okay? So like
you.
Caleb's picking his ear right now. How does his brain know he's actually picking his ear? What does it actually feel when he's doing that? And how does he make sure, how does his body make sure that his fingernail doesn't rip off the skin on the inside of his ear? So there's going to be some sort of relay system there. But today what we're thinking about is just the sensory input piece. Okay. That help, Cohen?
Yes, thank you.
No problem. Okay, so let's get out of there. Let's go here. Just going to apologize for this. This is a lot of slidage. Painful, mind-numbing slidage is what I call it. Sensation. Sensation, it's making you wait. Yeah. So the whole idea here is, of course, you are a living organism that needs to find your way through a world that looks very real outside your eyes, right? Yes, no, maybe? I mean, seriously, you just look outside your eyes and you assume everything you see is real. Like, you can touch it, you can feel it. There's some feedback system there that's collecting information and saying, oh yeah, okay, I'm writing something. I can see that I'm writing something. How Mother Nature does this is still beyond our understanding. Okay, so I really want you to wrap your brain around that. And this isn't going to turn into some sort of like metaphysics lecture about reality. That's bullshit. What I want you to pay attention to is the fact that Mother Nature needs to figure out what the limits of perception are. All right, so sensation really is, sure, you can look out your window and because of previous experience, you know that maybe some of the colors you're seeing mean something. Maybe when you walk into a tree, you know that it's solid. All of these sorts of things are pieces of information that have traveled through that. Notice now I have colors and you guys are in trouble. We can do this. And I think yesterday I used green, right, for our interneurons. Most of what we're talking about today is the fact that even though we have to decorate the body with different types of receptors to detect a sensation, they all pretty much have the same wiring diagram to them. And yet, once again, I'm going to make sure you hear it. We have a first order neuron that activates a second order neuron, and will then ultimately activate a third order neuron that synapses at that primary somatosensory cortex. Okay, so you're like, wow, that's the second time he said that today. And I've seen the basic pattern this semester. When he says things multiple times, I usually see it later in the shape of a question. I don't even understand what I'm reading. Sound about right? Yeah, cool, fantastic. Look, I'm doing my job well. Okay, cool. Now, you're like, okay, I got this general idea, and maybe you've even overlaid some of the details as to where this is going. Our first order neuron is signaling into the spinal cord. Our second order neuron is synapsing at the thalamus. And of course, the sensation is being detected. I should say it's actually being routed to that primary somatosensory cortex. What happens to it after that, your textbook doesn't even touch. Okay? But what it does mean is that we can start thinking about what sensation and perception is, right? So sensation is the conscious or subconscious awareness of the external or internal environment. Everybody wearing slippers right now, raise your hand. I don't need to see it, right? But a moment ago, you weren't even thinking about the fact you are wearing slippers. Because I made you perceive it, you're now aware in that one location of your body if you're wearing them. If you're not, right now you're thinking, what do my feet feel like that I'm actually not wearing slippers? Okay. So you actually, I know it's horrible. Your brain has this ability to switch between levels of perception that are then verified by sensation. Okay, you're like, no, I'm wearing socks. Nope, I'm not wearing socks. I can feel the wood floor underneath my feet. Oh, feel the plush carpet. I can extend my toes and pull the pile of carpeting through my toes, and it feels wonderful. No, nobody? You're like, where's my coffee? Okay, cool. Each type of sensation is called a sensory modality. Okay, touch, pain, vision, hearing, these are all modalities. And sensory modalities are grouped together as either general senses or special senses. Special senses get their own chapter, 17. Today, it's all about general sensation. Okay. What is somatic? That tactile feeling of the pencil inside your hand, what it means to actually feel heat or cool, what it means to actually be proprioceptive. Okay. You're thinking to yourself, how do I actually balance all of this information inside of my brain? And unfortunately, we don't even broach that inside this class. Simultaneously, inside your body, when I say a bad joke and you feel nausea as a result of that, what actually happens, of course, this is a series of a sum of materials that are a sum of events that are happening that the receptors inside of your body are detecting. Okay, pressure, which hormones are being released where, okay, is tissue actually being stretched? What does it actually mean to be hungry? Okay, what's actually going on inside of your stomach, okay, versus what's actually being interpreted inside of your brain? And then temperature versus thermal thermal detection. What does temperature actually mean inside of your body? And you can imagine the receptors for each of these states are in different locations. Yes, Amy.
So, so I'm interested in the difference between touch and pain. I guess I thought that they might be more closely related than they are. And from what I'm getting from this slide, touch, tactile senses are somatic, and pain is visceral.
Well, you're going to have different types of pain, right? So think of it like this. Let's go back to chapter 5 for just a moment, right? And remember inside chapter 5, she's like, I can barely remember yesterday. You want me to conjure up chapter 5 inside my brain, right? So let me draw chapter 5 for you in one hastily, poorly drawn cartoon, right? It's good for your final exam. Woohoo! Where we have our epidermis, our dermis, and our hypodermis, so EDH, right? And what you actually have here to help you understand your question is that, remember, you actually have a gradient of receptor endings that are all attached at different depths of tissue. And remember what we were doing inside chapter 5. I was like, go ahead, pinch yourself, make sure you're awake, make sure you actually did sign up for this class. You haven't fallen into the matrix and you took the blue pill instead of the red pill, right? For those of you who get the reference. The rest of you who don't, well, get a life. Anyways.
I get it. That's a good reference. Great movie.
Yeah. Okay, so now, but just to make sure you understand the answer, Amy, you can feel the outside world. Remember, you have these Mesner corpuscles, you have free nerve endings, right? But if you hyperactivate any one of these, right? So if we take, imagine if you will, hold your hand out so it's facing the screen, okay? Fantastic, separate your fingers. I'm gonna take a piece of paper and I'm gonna give you a paper cut in between one of your fingers, right? Okay, you're like, I hate you even more than I did 5 seconds ago. And now I'm gonna take lemon juice and I'm gonna pour that on top of it, right? Okay, fantastic. You will never forget that example. What's happening there, of course, is you can put your hand down. You're like, no. Okay, what's happened is we cut through the epidermis. We cut into those areas where we've now opened up the ends of the dendrites of these free nerve endings, right? And now we put in some acidic material on top of that. So we changed the entire charge of the membrane, and we've now superactivated that. And that's why you feel pain as opposed to, oh my God, there's something tickling my finger, right? With me?
So they are related.
They are very much so related. Okay, she's like, why didn't you just say that?
Oh, that was a good example.
Hopefully you don't forget it in the middle of an exam, right? Yes, no, maybe. Okay, so, and that actually allows us, your question actually allows us to do something that we're going to have to build on, right? And I'm going to change color here. Look at what I'm doing. With me so far? Which means that this is a first order neuron that's collecting a specific modality of sensation. It's traveling to the same location, that lateral gray horn, but where it goes to inside the spinal column and how it ascends to that primary somatosensory cortex is all part of the general somatic pathways that we're going to be studying, okay? And we call visceral sensation general because, yeah, the day in, day out maintenance of, say, peristalsis or migratory mobility complexes inside of your digestive system, you don't need to think about that. But the musculature of your body needs to know when to contract and when to relax relative to the size of the material inside of your body, okay? That's why all of these systems are in place. Okay, now special senses, like I said, they get their own chapter, but smell, taste, vision, hearing, equilibrium, yada, yada, yada. They're all distinct, and here's a nudge, nudge, hint, hint, wink, wink. They all pretty much use bipolar neurons at some distinct location in their signaling pathway. So if we've thought about somatic and I've drawn for you unipolar neurons, when we start thinking about special senses inside chapter 17, I will show you where those bipolar cells are to make sure you pay attention to that. So here's that cartoon for you. Unfortunately, here it's in yellow, okay? And how do you know when you're cold? Please don't tell me goosebumps and all that sort of crap, although it's really cool. Oh, I was reading about this mechanism over the weekend about what it is cold actually does to your signaling systems, okay, inside your body, but you don't really want to hear about that. But what is cold?
You shiver.
That's what you do, but what is cold?
Oh.
It's like your isn't it like your Meissner's corpuscle? I don't know, I could have it wrong, but some nerve like detecting like a change in like
Okay, good start.
temperature and like.
Okay, so
Yeah.
You just said something, Ryan, and Sophia did as well. What is temperature?
What did she say?
I've never thought about this before. I really don't care either. Will it be on the test? Well, what you need to do is remember that temperature is the kinetic movement of materials inside the atmosphere, right? The warmer it actually is, the more those molecules move, which means those molecules slam into materials at a specific rate. You actually have a series of receptors that detect either hot or cold environments because it changes the shape of the receptor as a result of that free energy hitting them, right? Or not hitting them for that matter. And here's the important part. When you think about what actually happens to your body when you go out, although it doesn't happen in the Northeast anymore, when you get like 3 feet of snow, wet, rainy snow sitting on your windscreen and you have to go out and clean it off with your bare hands. Oh, that sounds like Buffalo. Anyway, right? And then what's happening, of course, is that cold weather is actually doing something. It's telling your body to move blood away from, say, your fingers. Yes, no, maybe? Notice inside chapter 16, that is no longer named a action potential or a graded potential. We call this a receptor potential. Like, but why? Why? We'll come back to that later. Okay. Notice that there is no axon hillock here for us to actually generate an action potential. So the receptor potential generates the action potential that travels along this myelinated first order neuron, saying hello to the cell body here inside the dorsal root ganglia as it skips its way into your spinal cord.
So it's almost the same thing as an action potential. It's just related to temperature.
Well, the temperature will cause the receptor potential, Ryan, and that receptor potential becomes the action potential.
Ah, okay. I got it.
Okay, and this could be cold, this could be heat, this could be all sorts of things. But the idea now is inside chapter 16, you're refining what we taught you inside chapter 12.
Yeah. That makes sense. You're adding to it. Okay.
Exactly. Okay. And you'll notice we changed the vocabulary. There's no graded potential here. Bless you. Okay, it's a receptor potential. That receptor potential becomes the action potential, which then travels to the spinal column.
So is it
Yeah.
only when you're talking about sensation that we change it from the graded potential to the receptor potential?
You're right, and you're also going to see that they won't just be receptor potentials. Depending upon which receptor system we're using, we might name it something else as well. Okay. Come on, computer. Okay, so in this case, vibration, touch. When we use, so remember a moment ago I drew the skin. I'm eavesdropping, sorry. Is it worth listening to? Is it not worth listening to? Is it worth trying to figure out to silence them? Okay, so let's imagine this is a Pacinian corpuscle, and this is in the hypodermis of your skin, right? And what you actually have here is the ability to, with sufficient vibrational stimulus, right? Vibrational stimulus is like, this homeostasis. What's happening there is that energy transfer is passing through the connective tissue that's now going to stimulate that dendrite inside that connective tissue. That causes a receptor potential here, traveling along our first order neuron, saying hello to our unipolar cell body, traveling into the spinal column. Okay, you're like, hey, how's that any different? Well, it took a specific type of stimulus to activate this receptor potential to travel through that connective tissue layer. Okay. So how's this different? Well, here's one that's really different. Who here, do I have any chocolate lover people? Like, what type of chocolate do you guys like?
Dark
Dark.
chocolate.
Heck ass, we got the dark chocolate people. So when you drop that on your tongue, you'll notice it doesn't melt the same way and cover your tongue the same way that milk chocolate does. Yes, no, look at you, you're salivating, right? Right? You shouldn't comment on that. It's like 8:30 in the morning. Yeah, I know, whatever. We have to make sure you're awake. Okay, but now when you think about what's actually happening there, your brain is detecting that sugar molecule, and it's doing it on these specific receptor cells that are called gustatory cells, and they're in the papilla of your tongue. And this receptor potential across these modified receptor cells will now release neurotransmitter to activate our first order neuron. Okay, and everybody's like, oh, this is completely different than the previous picture. And the answer is yes, Amy, go ahead, ask. I see you.
I kind of like this one.
You do?
I like this. I think so.
You should. So, because if you're like, so the reason why I ask between dark chocolate and milk chocolate, of course, is milk chocolate is designed to melt over your tongue, right? So you put it on the top of your tongue, and remember, you have two different cranial nerves that are detecting this, right? So they're sending that information going, oh, this is good. We've got sugar, and sugar is going to release more neurotransmitter, and more neurotransmitter is going to activate more nerves, right? Forgetting about that cranial nerve and all of that stuff, remember that we've now activated a first order neuron here. And notice, it's using the same type of route. But what's different is what was the receptor and the fact that we're using a modified receptor cell. Okay? With me? So now, depending upon where you, okay, Nicole's shaking her head inside. What part don't you get?
No, I mean, it's all like coming together, yeah. it's
Okay,
fine.
cool. Yeah, and I don't, believe me, hopefully I'm aware enough now that I don't expect you to instantaneously see the discrete differences. But ultimately, it simply comes down to the type of information that's being collected. And you want to start figuring out a way, oh, okay, to say, I see groups of modalities, and that's the way you want to place them together. Okay.
So,
Yeah.
so if it depends on the type of stimulus,
Yeah.
but I guess my question is, is it reaching, or is the type of stimulus reaching for a specific type of receptor, or does the receptor kind of change to meet the stimulus?
Receptors never change, right?
Okay.
So think of it like this. I usually teach it this way when we're thinking about like the immune system inside AMP2. I can pick you up, put you in a helicopter, travel to anywhere in the globe, drop you off, and your body can identify whatever that pathogen is that's going to try to kill you, regardless of where you grew up. Does that make sense? So specificity is in place. The same thing occurs here. The receptors are looking for unique materials that will only activate them. Okay? Does that make sense?
It does. Follow-up question.
Go ahead.
Are the receptors sort of like placed very close to one another, meaning like the different types of receptors can live in the same areas?
In fact, they do, right? So if you just think about vision for just 1 second, right? You're going to learn when we get to the eye, you have red, green, blue, and rods and cones. And how do you actually detect these different frequencies? Each of those detect a specific type of sensation, and that's what is all brought together. The processing piece inside your nervous system, well above our pay grade for this class. But what it does is it takes all those pieces of information and then really figures out what the image will look like from each of those individual pieces of information. Sophia. She's like, no, you're not going to ask a question. The box just slid over to you. Okay?
Oh, no.
I'm trying to be a responsive instructor and make sure you guys learn at 8:35 in the morning. Okay, we're only on slide 5. Okay, so now that I've given you this idea that there are receptors, chapter 16 is the hard work of chapter 16 is figuring out how the receptors have been classified. So getting to the question you were asking, Amy, is, hey, exteroreceptors may actually be described in several different ways. They could be part of hearing, vision, smell, taste, so outward-facing receptor structures versus, say, internal-facing receptor structures. Whereas, say, proprioceptors, okay, you guys have missed out on something truly awesome that I do inside lab. And I don't know if Hannah will verify this or not. But, you know, when you actually learn bones inside AMP1, I take all of the bones and I put them inside of boxes and I have you guys figure out what they are. You're like, what the fuck? Anyway, yeah, what the fuck? But yeah, you don't.
Box game.
Box game, exactly, right? You're like, how in the world does this happen? Well, what it is a series of using exteroreceptors, proprioceptors, and stereognosis to actually figure out what a bone is, because you see it using one set of receptors, right? So your vision will say, oh, I know the parietal bone looks like this, and oh, I know the left parietal bone looks like this. When you can no longer see it and you feel it inside of a box, can your brain figure out what you're looking at? Did you get that? Okay. So you take away one piece of the information your brain can figure out, but you don't get to do that because of COVID. Blame COVID. It has nothing to do with me. Okay. But the idea is what your body does is it takes all of these pieces of information and then sums them together. What you need to take away from this is there are tables inside of chapter 16 that break these modalities of sensation up into extero, intero, and proprioceptors. Okay? You can also classify them by their microscopic structure. We've already done this inside of chapter 5, where you have free nerve endings that are non-encapsulated, and these detect specific types of sensation: pain, thermal, tickle, itch, and some touch sensations. Encapsulated nerve endings, these will detect things like pressure, vibration, as well as sort of deeper touch sensations. Separate cells, again, mostly chapter 17 here, so we'll come back to those then. But you can see what we do is, hey, at one point in time, we didn't have microscopes, and we could say if you could detect the outside world using exteroreceptors, you could use it in interoreceptors. Once we got microscopes, you can start looking at the individual nerve structures. Now, that type of stimulus, nudge, nudge, hint, hint, wink, wink, is also very important. How do we actually describe what a mechanoreceptor is versus, say, what an osmoreceptor is? You're like, oh my God, all I'm hearing is receptor, receptor, receptor. Okay? Well, mechanoreceptors we've been thinking about since the very first day of class. They detect mechanical stimulation. And that's touch, pressure, vibration, yada, yada, yada. They're all pretty much the same thing. But to remember this, take your finger, your thumb, find a piece of skin, and pinch. Mechanoreceptors, just the same as inside chapter 12, when I said you deform the channel, and that deformed channel lets ions in. Thermoreceptors we just discussed, okay? But nociceptors, I just had you activate, right? If you pinched your skin hard enough, those nocidetectors were working as though they were, or nociceptors were working the same as mechanoreceptors. The distinction is this. Nociceptors tend to be found on free nerve endings. They tend to be found on free nerve endings. Not exactly the case, because in some parts of your body, you'll see there's fast pain and slow pain and all this sort of crap. Okay, photoreceptors, your eyes, chemoreceptors. You're like, what was that? Well, you inhale, right? And when you inhale, whatever's inside the air decorates the actual receptors in your nose, your nasal epithelium. Osmoreceptors, probably the most important set of receptors inside of your body, because you are a bag of salt water. Because you're a bag of salt water, what you're actually doing is you're measuring the amount of fluid and the solute concentration inside of that bag of salt water. Nudge, nudge, hint, hint, wink, wink. Those osmoreceptors are found inside of your hypothalamus, by the way. Woohoo!
So for the, go back, please.
You go back.
So the difference between the chemoreceptors and the receptors is the location.
No, chemicals, these are not water, right? Osmoreceptors detecting water. So your nose, even though it says smell here, really what it's doing is what is saturated, what is not saturated, right? Okay. Have you ever noticed that smelling anything with dust around, you don't really smell a lot of things? Yes, no, maybe?
No, I just sneeze.
You just, oh, that's a different reflex. But the idea, of course, is osmoreceptors are trying to detect the amount of fluid, say, in your tongue or in your nose. Though it can tell, it has outside input to say that you are dehydrated or you're not dehydrated.
Okay. Is it like if you smell somebody cooking, you can almost taste it?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so that would be an example of an osmoreceptor kind of?
Well, that would be more, I would say that it's being carried in them with a high enough concentration to now decorate the receptors in your nose for chemoreceptors at that point in time. But if you've ever noticed on a really, really dry day, it's really hard to smell anything. Mm-hmm. Because there's no water to actually detect the odors that are being carried. Have you ever been to the desert? No. Different odors are really hard to pick up, right? Okay, that's the point.
Okay.
Okay, cool. So here's skin. We've already done this. Notice inside chapter 16, we rename all of these receptors, okay? You have a type 1 cutaneous receptor. Free nerve ending is the same, but you're going to notice what we're doing now is free nerve endings collect these types of senses: pain, itch, tickle, cold, and warmth. Type 1 cutaneous mechanoreceptors detect touch and pressure. Mesner corpuscles detect the onset of touch, whatever the hell that actually means, right? Just take your finger and you're like, oh, you're just gently touching. Think about the last time somebody caressed your skin, right? Think that's a type 1, where are we? No, that's a corpuscle of touch, right? You're like, I don't want to be thinking about somebody caressing my skin in this class. Good, I don't want you thinking about it either. I need you to learn what these things are doing, and I don't care how you do it, as long as I don't blush, we'll be okay. Okay, cool. Now, type 2 cutaneous mechanoreceptors. This is where the skin is stretching and there's pressure on it. And the whole purpose, of course, is also something you missed inside this class is I ask a student every single year to see if they can rip the skin off of my body. And I'm thinking Caleb would probably go for this one because I've given a hard time so far this semester. He'd be like, oh yeah, I'm going to wrap my hands around your skin. I'm going to twist, right? And the twisting sensation is what the Ruffini corpuscle detects. Okay, with me? And then finally, the Pacinian corpuscle or the lamellated corpuscle senses high frequency vibrations. And you'll see how Mother Nature literally decorates different parts of your body for each of these to work where they're needed. Now, a moment ago, I said that there are actually 2 types of pain. And you're like, yeah, I know. I hear you every single morning. There's the pain of thinking about coming to class, and there's the pain of hearing your voice. There's the slow pain of thinking about coming to class. That's more of a perceived type of pain. Whereas when you actually first hear my voice, it's an acute, sharp, or pricking perception of pain, right? Fantastic. Now, the idea, of course, is that Mother Nature needs both of these, right? Where one, you become aware of a situation. The other, of course, is what happens when you've been standing on your feet for too long for one day, or you've been sitting in a location for too long. Literally, your body will tell you to move so you don't end up destroying the tissue that's being supported in that space. Deep somatic pain, these are the skeletal muscle joints and the fascia. We don't really care about it so much, but when we compare it to, say, visceral pain, okay, that actually is your body making you aware that something's just not hunky-dory inside of you at that point in time. There isn't much you can do about it. It's not like you can tell your stomach to stop feeling pain. Your brain just wants you to know that it's in pain. Your textbook goes off on this referred pain sort of crap thing. Go talk to your doctor about it. Okay. Now, what are the different types of ways we can detect proprioception? We've thought about reflexes already to this point. There are muscle spindles, tendon organs, and joint kinesthetic receptors. Notice my vocabulary is becoming much more precise than it was inside chapter 13. Okay, but to show it to you, take a look here. What we have is for any single muscle inside of your body, remember a moment ago I was saying, how does Caleb's body know that he's not tearing his ear apart, right? What has to happen is there'll be a series of information outputs that are going to the central nervous system, okay, utilizing a series of intrafusal muscle fibers and sensory nerve organs. And that's how the brain knows what's happening to the muscle. It then sends a series of signals back to those muscles to say, look, you have to apply this much force to make sure that the work gets done at the appropriate force. You're like, okay, but that's somatic motor, and that would be completely correct. The gamma motor neuron is telling the musculature how much work needs to be done. We'll come back to that later. When we think about what tendon organs are doing, they're essentially fancy Pacinian corpuscles, right? And by fancy, I mean they have much more surface area. And remember that the tendon is the sum of all of the epimysium, perimysium, and endomysium traveling to a space. So all of that force is what's being detected. So remember, it seems like a lifetime ago when Amy was trying to bench press 285 pounds and the weights fell down on top of her, almost instantly decapitating her, but there was a spotter there to save her, right? The idea, of course, is that they failed because the force on those tendons was so great, the musculature just stopped functioning, right? So that's what their job is. They're supposed to detect how much force is actually being applied to those bones. Great little tables, nudge, nudge, hint, hint, wink, wink, for you to actually put all of these in place. The difficult part, well, I don't know. I suppose if categorizing types of information, the first quarter of this chapter can be really daunting. The second part, though, is kind of the fun part. How does your body know what type of information is being sent to your primary somatosensory cortex? And that's what we're thinking about here. So yeah, I've drawn this for you, yay, and you know we're going to the primary somatosensory cortex. And I'm only drawing this all in black just to save time at this point in time, because most of you have stopped listening, okay? And now what we've done is we've said, look, we've got different types of nerves that are actually collecting all of this information, right? So we have different modalities of sensations that are being collected. How do they know where to go inside that primary somatosensory cortex? They know because what's going to happen is here is our spinal cord. There's our dorsal root ganglia there. Coming in here, lateral, anterior. I know it looks like a crab. It's not supposed to just yet. We'll make it look more like a really, this is supposed to look like a spinal cord presentation. I don't know what's happening here. You guys are like, that just looks wrong. My brain says that looks wrong. I'll try and finish the cartoon quickly so it looks closer to what you're supposed to be learning. There we go. Fantastic. Whew. Dodged a bullet there. Right? Okay, cool. And if you remember properly back into chapter 13, look, we had this structure here and it traveled in. And what we did inside chapter 13 is we put together, say, a reflex arc. So let's put some green here, right? Green is going to go to our interneuron. And then we'll have red. Oh, no! I just lost my cartoon. Fuck. Sorry, I just swore. You gotta watch that drawing again. Sorry, you're like, you can't unsee this crap once it happens. All right, let's see if we can do this a little more rapidly here. Woohoo! Yeah, anterior, there we go, fantastic. Anterior again. Is anybody else who's going to need therapy after taking this class?
Tons and tons of therapy.
Oh, so we need blue. Yeah, exactly. Fantastic. So that goes here. Green. Let's see. Don't fuck this up this time, Jonathan. Red. Woohoo. Right, so this is our reflex arc. Yes, no, maybe. You're like, yeah, no, I have no idea what you've drawn there. It means absolutely nothing to me. It looks a lot like the cartoons you guys gave me on your take-home quizzes, in case you didn't know that. You're like, wow, how did he own my cartoon? Because this is what yours all looked like, by the way. In case you were ever wondering if I actually read that shit you sent me. That and a great bottle of whiskey make a good Friday night. Okay, for those of you inside AA, I'm sorry if I just touched on a nerve. Okay, cool. So, what is it? It's Mary Poppins. A little bit of sugar helps the medicine go down, or something like that, right? So in this case, remember, this is a reflex arc, but our components are similar. Where students tend to make mistakes transitioning into chapter 16 is this. This is still 3 nerves, right? Primary, so it's still our first order neuron, but here's an interneuron. Even though an interneuron is a second order neuron, it's part of a reflex arc that now directly activates the motor output. So this is distinctly different than, try not to get rid of this cartoon again, this cartoon that I drew at the beginning of class. Okay, with me so far? Now what chapter 16 does is says, well, you know, that's all here, and it is all here. Your reflex system is independent of what we're about to talk about. But what happens is your reflex system actually co-opts the input that's traveling in here. if it's something really painful. Let's imagine you are your 5-year-old self and you put your hand on that hot oven plate, right? What happens? You pull your hand back quickly, so that would activate your reflex system to actually get your arm to pull back rapidly. But at the same time, now a series of, notice where I traveled to. I traveled to the white columns on the posterior portion of the spinal cord. And these are going to ascend. They'll travel to the thalamus, and then they'll, opposite side, Jonathan, they'll travel to the opposite side and then map that that primary somatosensory cortex, which is the posterior gyrus or post-central gyrus of the brain. And you can't figure that out from this cartoon yet. But take a look at what I did. Here's our first blue structure here. Here's our second order neuron here. And this is our third order neuron here. So let me put that first, second, third. And I'll put that here. First, second, third. And that's what we're going to be studying now. So if there were many different somatic modalities that can be collected, what this means is, depending upon the modality that was stimulated, we are going to travel using different pieces of the spinal cord to ascend to the thalamus and then send a unique third order neuron to a unique portion of that primary somatosensory cortex. Okay, so hopefully that helped clear things up to make sure that you're not confusing this information with the information of a reflex arc. Okay. So there are many different types of information that can be carried. The pathways to the cortex consist of thousands and thousands of sets of 3 neurons classified as first, second, and third order neurons. Okay? Go ahead, step on your big toe right now. Use your left foot, step on your big right toe. Okay? That is a unique set of first order, second order, and third order neurons that have just been sending information to, I said step on your right toe, so it went to your left hemisphere cortex. Okay? What happens to it after that? You know, like I said, we don't cover that inside this class. However, we can break those pathways for the purposes of this class into somatic sensory impulses on 3 general pathways. Okay? What this means is, regardless of what type of sensation is being collected, it will travel into one of these pathways. And a way to think of it is this. Okay, which is a better city, Boston or New York?
Obviously, New York.
New York.
Oh, you guys are so wrong, it's insane. Anyway.
What, Boston is why you say the word half?
You just failed the course, Cohen. Anyway.
I mean, like, where's Buffalo on that list? I'm sorry.
Oh, it's next to a thermonuclear reactor dump, if I remember properly. But anyway, but oh, wow. This is how I know I'm mentally manipulating the population. Anyway, so no, Boston isn't where that came from. I'm part of an immigrant family. We came over here some while ago. Okay, so just
I feel bad now.
Oh, no, don't. Not at all. Are you kidding with me?
Can I make one more joke, though? Did you immigrate from Canada? Because it's very Canadian pronunciation of that word.
Only somebody from Buffalo would be envious of Canada. But anyway. You're definitely going to need therapy now.
I got jokes. It's okay. I'm already
laughing
in
too hard
therapy.
to concentrate now. Oh my God.
It's okay. We're disintegrating. We are approaching the 1 hour mark, which is when this class usually starts to fall apart. Exactly, right? So we're not done yet though. But this is a really good time to take a break. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to pause the recording. I'm going to shut off the cameras, go to the bathroom, stuff like that. We're not finishing until we get through these pathways. Okay? So far, so good? Good. Let's do that. Oh, man. Pause. You know we can see that, right? Let's hit pause again. Okay, cool. Let's get back to work. So, before we degenerated into like oblivion, and the whole reason why I was asking if Boston was better than New York, right? Because it is, aside from the obvious. And the reason was there are multiple ways to actually get to Boston, right? If you're coming from southwest coast of Connecticut, you might choose to use Route 95, or you can do 15 to 91 and then come across 90 to get into Boston. Depends upon how you actually want to get there, right? Each one of those examples would be a specific type of pathway that would carry a specific piece of information, right? You can't, I don't know, what can't travel on like 15? You can't have specific types of vehicles traveling on it, right? So on the Merit, you can't have 18 wheat-wheelers, right? Nothing above 8 feet. And you would use that analogy as a way to include or exclude types of information traveling on a pathway. Now, that's the way you really want to think about these, because you're going to see that hopefully by the time you're finished, what you can do is you can break the human body up into where Mother Nature has these different pathways assembled. And notice what I'm doing here. Mother Nature can literally separate these unique pieces of information on different locations inside of the body, and then just use subsets of the spinal cord to then ascend that sensory information upward. So far, so good? Like, I have no idea. I just see you draw a stick figure with 3 circles around it. Your goal is to understand what those 3 circles mean. How does that sound? Sound like a plan? I think you guys can handle it. And if not, remember, you can stay in New York. I'll take Boston. Okay. Say, good, that works for us. We don't want you there anyway. Yeah, I hated living there. It was horrible. You only had like about 1 hour of quiet between like 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning inside the entire city. And then your day started with the trash trucks at 4 o'clock in the morning. Okay, so posterior column medial lemniscus pathway. How many times have you heard that in your lifetime? I double dog dare you guys. You guys should go to a bar and try and pick up somebody going, hey, do you want to find out where your posterior column medial lemniscus pathway is? I'm sure there's some deviant out there that might go, right? But the idea, of course, is these are impulses from the limbs, the trunk, and the neck of the posterior portion of your skull, right? And you're like, oh, okay, I can figure this out. And in fact, that's exactly what I want you to do. Think about that first cartoon I just drew for you. So from the limbs, which part of the limbs? The trunk, which part of the trunk? If it's the neck, where in the neck? And then which part of the posterior of the head? Okay? And if the impulse is being collected from there, it's going to use the posterior medium column lemniscus pathway. And you're like, what the fuck do all of those words mean? Don't worry, we get to that. Okay? Woohoo! You're like, holy sugar pops. Now here's a cartoon we haven't seen before, right? So let me orient you. This is your lumbar spinal cord. This is your cervical spinal cord. This is a segment from your medulla. This is a segment from your midbrain. And this is a frontal dissection through the human brain such that you can resolve the thalamus, and then you can see the primary somatosensory cortex. And now you know why I started the lecture off with PSSC, okay? Primary somatosensory cortex. Because ultimately, what I need you to learn is, notice what I've done here. Hopefully I've set you up so you can see that if we are using the cervical spinal cord, or say the lumbar spinal cord, we're collecting specific types of information that will then ascend, traveling through the posterior portion of the spinal column. Posterior column, medial lemniscus. The lemniscus piece is going to be inside the midbrain here. But now what we're going to do is we're going to put the whole story together. Okay, a moment ago I asked you to step on your right toe, correct? Yes, no, maybe use your left heel. So on your right toe, what happened is there was touch and pressure that was collected through a series of receptors. And what they did is they traveled in using a first order neuron. They traveled, notice they didn't travel into the gray matter, instead they traveled directly to the white matter, where they ascended. And notice you have to follow this blue line tightly. Can't be sloppy here. You're going to travel into the gracial fasciculus. So you are literally ascending as a first order neuron through the gracial fasciculus until such times as you synapse in the medulla. You will decuss at, if I'm following this line properly, make sure we're going here to the gracial nucleus. We're going to synapse with our second order neuron that decusses inside the medulla, and then we'll ascend through the medial lemniscus portion of the midbrain, where it will now synapse, where the hell did my needle go? Synapse at the thalamus to activate now that third order neuron. And you know you've done it correctly because you stepped on one toe on one side of the body and you ended up on the opposite hemisphere of the brain. With me? You're like, I got this, no problem. You're like, yeah, of course you do. So receptors for touch, pressure, vibration, and proprioception for the lower limbs and lower trunk. So remember, I said the lower limbs, I said step on your big toe. Now imagine, if you will, I said, go over to your best friend, okay? As if you're home with somebody right now, go offline, go over and punch them in the shoulder, okay? Hey, it's great to see you, right? You're like, I'm joking about actually punching them, okay? I really don't want you to punch anybody, okay? But what's now gonna happen here is because you punch them in that specific location, the upper limb, now that information is gonna travel through its first order neuron, travels into that posterior column, and you're going to notice it travels into the cuneate fasciculus. Or if you're from Boston, cuneate fasciculus. And then it will ascend now to the cuneate nucleus, where it will now decuss inside the medulla, ascend through the medial lemniscus portion to the opposite side, where now it will synapse with our third order neuron. And you're thinking to yourself, I need to memorize all of these. And the answer to that is no. Learn one and you'll figure the rest of them out. Step on your big toe, lower limb, punch somebody in the shoulder, upper limb. Okay, that's how you figure out which pathways to use and when. Okay, because otherwise, what I've seen students do in the past is they try to muscle memorize this entire step, but you don't. Remember, it's just blue, green, green. Or in the case of this textbook, blue, purple, green. Okay.
So if it's the upper limb, would it be the information would be descending?
Mm-mm.
No.
All of this is somatosensory, which means all of this information, Sophia, is ascending. This,
Okay.
I had
No
one
matter
arrow.
which part. Okay.
So all of this information is ascending. And remember earlier I had this, there's one first order, second order, third order. What this is doing is it's showing you the complexity of, if you're starting on one side of the body and you're starting from a specific location, you'll decuss using a specific pathway to end up on the opposite side of the median of the body. Does that help?
Mm.
Okay.
What if you get punched in the head?
Oh, we have a pathway just for that, and you. Yeah, okay. Sorry, it's getting past my bedtime. Now, the anterior lateral, exactly. Depends. I know, no, neither can I. I'm like, the timing is perfect. You guys would think we actually set this stuff up as a comedy routine before the start of class, but we don't. Okay. Okay. So, anterior lateral spinothalamic pathway. Now, these names are used interchangeably inside your textbook. Nicole would be like, I'm going to roll out of bed. I can't take this anymore.
No, I just laugh really easily, so all this is like super entertaining.
Cool, but I hope you're learning something along the way. Because
Yeah.
believe it or not, laughing reinforces the learning. It does, which is why I make a complete idiot out of myself. Okay. Okay, so now getting serious for just a second here, because that's about all I'm going to do to last, is your textbook will interchange between anterior lateral and spinal thalamic pathways. What I want you to pay attention to is it goes spine to thalamus, okay? That's the way to remember. We're traveling from the spine to the thalamus here, and this is for this information to travel to the actual posterior somatosensory cortex, okay? So how does this work? So here's a different pathway. And notice this can be anywhere inside of the spinal cord, okay? This is going to sound kind of creepy, and I'm glad we're not inside a classroom where I don't have to make direct eye contact with any of you, okay? Are you ready now? Now that I've set it up for you, you're like, oh, creepy. I like creepy. Look at Caleb. He's like, okay. Sorry, you guys are going to punch me in the face. That's a different pathway, too. Okay, I'm recording this, so I'm intentionally setting up my class, not in any creepy way. You can't sue me for this question or anything like that, because this is going to go up on YouTube later. Okay, so who here likes to get tickled? Everybody's like, that's just so wrong. You can't ask shit like that. But if somebody's actually being honest, who actually likes to get tickled? And I don't want to know about what you're doing on Friday night, okay? Who likes to get tickled?
I don't feel tickle very well. So like for instance, someone who like if they're ticklish on their feet, they don't like when people touch their feet. It's not that I like when people touch my feet. It's just that there's
rabbit hole. Stay away from the rabbit hole, Amy. Stay away.
No, it's like God damn it. I keep on forgetting I'm gonna have to meet you guys in person at some point.
There's not a ladder.
People will be staring at your feet going, oh, she doesn't like her feet being touched.
No, I do. I like, not in a sexual way.
Oh, do you really?
Not in a sexual way. In a way that
stay away from that word.
If you go get, like, if I get a pedicure, I love getting a massage as well. And there are people who have ticklish feet who do not enjoy that. I might be totally on the wrong track here, but I don't care. It's for science.
There you go. Fantastic. Okay. I've done many things with my body for science too, but we won't discuss any of them.
I'm going to go die now. Bye.
Okay. Cool. The point is this, is if most people are being honest, exactly. Yeah, you're never, that's right. Remember, this is going on the World Wide Web right after class.
I'm in a cabin with all of my friends and they were like, that was an overshare. You are weird.
Good. Fantastic. Anyway, think about when you're a kid and somebody tried to tickle you. Everybody's now no longer smiling. They're like, yeah, no, that wasn't so cool. Yeah, this fucking humongous human being coming over going, right? The reality is, of course, tickling, okay, is supposed to be a determination system for if you're safe or you're not safe, right? That makes any sense? And you're like, yeah, this isn't a psychology class. The point is this, is that Tickling is the frequency with which pieces of information are coming in and traveling into your brain. And they use the spinothalamic pathway. Notice itch is different than tickling, okay? When a mosquito bites you and releases some irritant and the histamine inside of your skin, now, actually, I don't know why she's laughing, and I don't want to know. When this actually happens, what do you actually do? You scratch that, but that sensation isn't the same as a tickle. Is everybody with me? And everybody's like, you just got weird when you said you're a little kid and you tried to tickle somebody. Well, there's a reason for that, right? Mother Nature needed to design a system that would actually let your brain know that there are series of receptors on your body that are cutaneous, that are accepting that information, and it's either safe to stay put or to run away from. That makes sense? Good. Keep it that simple. Don't go into like deep cavernous thoughts or anything like that. The point is Mother Nature's creating using the spinothalamic pathway. Notice these are all indicators of trouble. Pain, cold, warmth, tickle, and itch. Okay? So a specific modality or type of information is going to send a unique type of information to your brain. And it's called this pathway because regardless of where you are on the spinal cord, those receptors will collect that information. Notice the decussing occurs here inside the spinal cord. Notice our decussing occurred inside the medulla in our previous set of ascending sensory inputs. This will now either ascend using the anterior spinothalamic or a lateral spinothalamic tract. You don't need to remember which one is using which. You just need to see that, notice we're not on the posterior column. Okay, so we're ascending using these unique tracts. We will travel through the spinothalamic tract inside the midbrain, which is where it actually gets its name from. Notice we synapse with our third order neuron inside the thalamus, so that is consistent. And then you travel to that primary somatosensory cortex. So far, so good?
So back to my overshare.
Yeah, okay.
I do want to know though, like, do I have some, I'm not ticklish. Does that mean that I'm missing something?
No, you're not.
Stop laughing.
She's like, oh yeah, I'll get you tickled. Right, so no, so.
Like your classmates hate you, please stop. But I am curious.
Now, so there are, so did anybody ever read The Girl Who Kicked the Hornet's Nest or The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo or any of those? Okay. Remember, she has her effed up brother who doesn't have any sensory receptors. So essentially, his genetic deformity is he doesn't actually have any of these receptors working on any of these pathways. Okay. So even though that's a literary analogy, what I want you to understand is the likelihood that you're suffering from something like that is, has to be one in well over 1 million humans on the face of the planet have that. Okay, so the likelihood that it's more than likely you feel safe more often than not. How does that sound? Okay, you're emotionally content. How does that sound? That just sounds weird. Let's move on. Okay.
It's really interesting, isn't it though?
No, this stuff is fascinating. It really is, because really what Mother Nature has done is she said, look, there are thresholds of indicators that you need to pay attention to. Okay? When was the last time? Okay, this is going to sound even weirder. What happened to you when you went inside the shower and you accidentally just turned on cold water? Yes,
I do that on purpose.
Yeah, because you feel alive, right? I think okay, whatever. Why did you move the way you moved? Nicole's trying hard not to laugh. She's like, I'm not telling you what I'm doing in the shower, and I don't want to know what you're doing in the shower. I just need to make sure people understand that.
Because you don't want to feel the cold.
Yeah, but what does that actually represent?
Being uncomfortable?
No.
Like a change in the the membrane
Receptors.
Your receptors?
Yeah.
Right. Fantastic. Well,
Yeah.
so remember, cold means your body has to work harder to stay warm, right? So when you detect something cold, it means your body, if it has a choice, will move away from that because it means it doesn't have to work harder. Does that make sense? Okay, for that matter, the harder piece is the chapter 15 piece. Cold means you have to stop blood flow to those areas that are now cold. Okay, that's part of that autonomic response. You're going to cause a vasoconstriction, all of that. But the body needs to know to do that.
I have a question.
Yeah, fire away.
Isn't that the same way? Isn't that like why people say to always jump in the pool instead of like walking in it?
Oh yeah. So Ryan mentioned a moment ago, like, you know, you take a cold shower. It does many different things, but what it does, why people use it therapeutically, of course, is it changes the rate and the depth of your breathing. And if you happen to survive this class and take AMP2 with me, one of your homework assignments is to actually go and take a cold shower, right? And then monitor what actually happens to your breathing rate. You'll notice most people immediately stop breathing, okay? It actually causes a temporary paralysis. You reset the breathing pattern at that point in time, and that's why people do it, especially in Scandinavian countries, right?
Wait, people like
Voluntarily jump in cold water all the time.
me personally, I don't like stop breathing. I actually increase breathing.
Yeah, so at some point in time, you need to warm up the body, and then the air is warmer than the water is.
Okay.
Okay?
Is that why some people do the like the cold, I don't know, I forgot what it's called, but like how they have like the cold bath that they sit in
Like the
and
ice bath?
something for like weight loss?
Yeah, so let's imagine, so cool sculpting in
That's what it's called, yeah.
Yeah, cool sculpting in Westport, where you can go inside this tiny little tube and they freeze you with liquid nitrogen. What they're doing is they're applying temperature to specific parts of your body to remove adipose tissue, because it takes more energy in that one location to keep that one area warmer. You know, you don't get rid of, so the good part is, yes, thermogenesis will remove the tissue. You haven't removed the adipocytes, so the moment you eat more calories than your body actually needs, those triglycerides go back directly to that space, right? So enough of the cold. Enough of the itch, enough of the pain. But here's the take-home message, because you're like, no, this stuff is interesting. I want to know why I feel pain. Well, you feel pain to make sure that you move away from it. Does everybody understand that? You feel pain to make sure your body knows that this could be something that could end your life, and therefore you move away from it.
I have another question.
Sure, fire away.
So basically, like, you know, when you have, like, you know, when you're sick and you have, like, a fever, why does hot water, like, when you're getting water that hits your skin, it sometimes actually hurt?
I didn't hear the last part there, sorry.
Like, why, like, when you're sick and you have a fever, or, like, when you get in the shower, like, sometimes when the water hits your skin, it actually hurts?
Yeah, so I have some thoughts on it. I don't know what the actual reason would be, but that irritability is one of the characteristics of a fever response. And what's happening, depending upon the type of cold that you have, if it's a viral infection, you have this molecule, it's called interferon, and it's now traveling through your bloodstream. And it's intentionally making you feel bad, so you actually stop moving and save that energy for fighting off the infection. Okay, so what Mother Nature is trying to get you to do is sort of stop, sort of hunker down and take care of yourself. Now, how that would happen, all of the hairs on your body, right, they respond to temperature changes. Remember those erector pili muscles? Okay, anytime you change the temperature inside your body, that's going to require energy. this is just guessing at this point in time. So anybody who sees this on the World Wide Web and goes, that guy's a fucking idiot. This is just me guessing. But the idea, of course, would be that, you know, it's telling you that either you're going to be spending energy you need to be using for something else, or this is just a really dumb idea and your brain is trying to make sure you understand that, okay? But beyond that, it's just speculation, okay? And I don't want to spend too much time doing that. Getting back to that hair stuff, though, and it made me think of you guys inside class when I was reading it over the weekend, or maybe it was yesterday. My God, yesterday's Monday. So it turns out that cold and hair activation. So remember, think about going outside inside the cold. What happens to the little hairs on your body? They stand up, right? What it turns out that actually drives hair growth and follicles and the thickness of the hair as a result of prolonged stimulation through cold. Okay? Now, nobody's ever demonstrated this before. This just came out, if this is yesterday or Sunday, sort of thing. So what this means is these receptors actually do much more than just detect that it's cold out. They actually try to modify the phenotype of the body as a result of those sensations. Okay. Okay, so again, aside from all of the sort of like natural history sort of learning material there, what you want to walk away from this figure understanding is pain, cold, warmth, and tickle travel on the spinothalamic pathway. Notice they access the second order neuron in the gray matter that will then ascend on the opposite side of the body, traveling through that spinothalamic tract to the thalamus, then ultimately the third order neuron synapses at the primary somatosensory cortex.
So kind of a lot of things happen in the second order neuron.
In fact, a way to think about it, Amy, is this, is that when you're trying to learn the distinction between these pathways, you're asking yourself this question: where has decussation occurred? And is there a name of a location in either the medulla or the midbrain that I need to know? Because the thalamus so far has been the same, right? Cool. Okay, let's try and finish this stuff off. My God, it's 9:30. This might be our longest day all semester long. Okay.
No, we went until 10 one time.
Did we really? I'm so sorry. I obviously suffered post-traumatic stress disorder because I don't remember it. She's like, we do. Yeah. Okay. So now, Amy, you're asking, what if you get hit in the head, right? So previously, we saw here that this was the back of your head. So somebody was like punched you in the back of the head, you're going to use the spinothalamic pathway. Okay. However, if you get punched in the face, like look at my beautiful face, it's happened quite a few times. I have no more teeth, bar fights galore, right? So it's like, she's like, did you really lose all your teeth in a bar fight? I used to tell people I played hockey, and I did for like one day. I think I gave myself a concussion. Anyway, right? You like that story coming from Buffalo. Anyway, so impulses from most somatic sensory structures are tactile, thermal, pain from your face, nasal cavity, oral cavity, and your teeth. Okay, how do you know when your teeth are actually in pain? Well, yeah, go ahead. No, you already grabbed the mic. I was like ready to cede the floor. Anyway, but the idea, of course, is all of these sensations are traveling on that trigeminal thalamic pathway. And what's interesting is somatic sensory impulses can reach the cerebellum via the spinocerebellar tracts. So you're like, what is going on here? If you've ever been punched in the face, right? Anybody ever been punched in the face? Nicole, you look like you've been punched in the face. You're like, what?
I've been punched in the jaw, not the face.
Nicole's like, my face is elegant. I didn't say it didn't look elegant. I just said you look like you've been punched in the face. Okay? She's like, no, I've not. So Ryan, you got punched in the jaw once. Tell me what happened in your knees.
In my knees?
Remember? Yeah, your knees.
I don't remember.
Drunk or were you sober?
It was alcohol related, so
So okay, so all bets are off here. Okay, so let's
unfortunately.
imagine. So let's imagine you're sober and you get punched in the jaw. What happens to your knees? Do you think?
Maybe buckle?
Fantastic. They're going to buckle, right? Yes, no, maybe. And the idea, of course, is the sensation you collect through the trigeminal thalamic pathway is sufficient to get you to fall to the ground. Okay? To protect you from getting pummeled in the face next. But what's going to happen is you've probably pissed off the wrong person at the bar. They don't care if you're drunk or sober. They're going to crawl on top of you and continue to pummel your face, right? Yes, no, maybe?
No, it was my friend.
We got to work on friend selection with you. First, they let you drink gin by yourself.
No. We'll work on it. I'll work on it in therapy.
There you go. Fantastic. Now, the point is this, is remember, what's this trigeminal thalamic thing anyway? Does anybody remember? Are you talking because your voice isn't live?
There are people in the room.
Oh, okay. Well, tell them we said hi. They're not allowed to have fun while we're taking a class.
Well, doesn't it have to do with there's like, it's one specific nerve?
Which nerve?
Mm,
You just took an exam on this.
I
crap.
know,
Come on,
I
folks.
don't, I think I got this one wrong. The facial nerve.
Is it? Well, there's definitely, your face is here, your nose, your oral cavity. So the point is this, right, is it actually is, see if I can show it to you. Take a look here. When you're looking at trigeminal nerve, right here, number 5, trigeminal thalamic pathway, receptors for touch, pressure, vibration, cold, yada, 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 blah, 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 coming through your teeth. Notice what they do here. A subset of them can ascend to the pons and, or I should say travel directly to the pons and then ascend here. A subset of them will also descend down to the medulla. Okay, so this is one of those great little trick questions where the trigeminal thalamic pathway uses both the pons and the medulla to send information up to finally get to that thalamus here. But notice, this is a cranial nerve. The cranial nerve is 5. And you guys are just not impressed. No? You should be. Okay? Where is all of this going? Okay? He's like, because we need to know, right? Okay, what's going to happen, of course, is each piece of information travel to the opposite side of the cortex relative to the sensation. So Ryan got punched in the left jaw. The primary somatosensory cortex was registering the sensation in the right hemisphere. Okay, if I remember that properly. Okay. What happens, of course, is here's that red and there's the blue. Remember, the blue is the primary somatosensory cortex. And this is the pattern. Please do not memorize this. This is homunculus man, right? Where you're going to see that the numbers of receptors that occupy real estate on that the posterior somatosensory cortex are here. You're going to notice the greatest surface area are your hands, your lips, and literally the tongue that actually travels down into the pharynx, right? And this makes sense if you think about it. When you're detecting the outside world, your hands literally do most of the work. It's going to sound horrible, and I really don't want to do this to you, but think about your first kiss. Like, no fucking way in hell, right? You're like this, you're like, right? And then when your lips first touched, you're like, oh, tingly all over, right? Okay, and that's the reason for that, of course, is your body needs to make sure, hey, I'm, like making my head, neck, and face vulnerable to, something really bad that could happen. But the idea is you also, at the same time, even though I tried to bring up this emotional context for you, your lips also are figuring out, hey, is that, who had waffles for breakfast this morning? Nobody? Nope. You had Cheez-Its. No, you had
no breakfast.
Yeah, same here. I'm working on you know, part of the reason why this class is so spastic today is I've had 2 cups of coffee and no food. So I'm like, right? So the idea, of course, is think about when you actually put your lips to your coffee cup. What does it have to do? Anybody?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, when you put your lips to your coffee cup, what does it actually do?
Does it
It like
sense
fits to the shape of the.
how hot or cold it
Exactly.
is?
It actually
Okay.
has to fit to the shape of that vessel, right? And in doing so, at least in my case, make sure I don't drop any of that magnificent, glorious caffeine-enriched liquid that keeps me going, right? So far, so good. So it actually has to be adaptable tissue, which is why Mother Nature actually has so many nerve endings inside of it, okay? Likewise, if you think about the digits on your fingers, right? Literally, when they manipulate, they actually have to be able to move to occupy different surface areas. Was that a question, or are you just like moving your hands? Okay.
Sorry, I'm just moving them so that I get the information
Fantastic.
in my brain.
Now, here's something to notice, okay? So there are areas of your body where this doesn't make sense. So you have very, very few nerve endings on your back and shoulders, right? She's like your elbow. I guess there's a pointed piece there. But the idea, of course, is let's imagine you're walking through a mountain pass and a cougar jumps on your back and tries to kill you, right? The reality is you actually sense less pain as a result of that. Many people are actually surprised at how little pain they feel. But the cougar is only interested in one thing, and that's getting to your neck. Where's your neck in this? Notice it's here. It's essentially non-existent. And does anybody know actually how a cougar or a lion or a tiger actually knows when it's killed something? No?
No, how?
They actually have sensors on their incisors that feel the blood that comes out of your carotid artery when they pierce.
Oh, okay.
So that's actually how
That's
they.
so cool.
It
How
is,
do you
I know,
do
it's
that?
awesome when you
How
think
do you
about it,
have
right?
that?
I'm sorry?
That's bone. That's so cool.
Yeah, so
Okay, really
it's like the
cool.
most merciful kill, right? So, right. But the idea, of course, is you're designed so that you don't actually feel any of it, whereas they're designed to actually sense to make sure that they've done it properly. Okay, yeah, I know. Now, please don't turn out to be a predator and kill things, okay? That's all I ask. Okay. Okay. Now, there are other pathways that are responsible for things such as posture, balance, and coordination of skilled movements. In fact, your take-home quiz this week is going to ask you to distinguish between these sort of generalized pathways here versus these pathways here. Because even though you may not be thinking about it, think about how many times you changed the shape of your spine during this lecture. You're like, I haven't thought about it, but you did. Okay, you did, because each time you changed your spine, maybe you started off your morning with your spine straight, erect, right? Which meant you had optimal oxygen capacity for your lungs. But then as the lecture went along and you started falling asleep, you actually changed the amount of postural muscles that were required to keep you functioning optimally, if you will. Nudge, nudge, hint, hint, wink, wink. Inside your textbook, there are concise distillations of these pathways. Okay, let me see if my coffee's in the way. Hold up a second here. I'll find the pages for you.
561.
Look at that, Sophia. Thank you. I was like, I wonder if Sophia's there already. Okay, and so 561 is for the posterior column-medial lemniscus pathway. Make sure you double 561. And notice what you see on page 562. You actually then have the major somatosensory pathways continued, where you have anterolateral, trigeminal thalamic, as well as the anterior and posterior spinocerebellar pathways. Okay? So now these 4 sets of pathways are where we will pick up tomorrow. And you know how we're going to start. I'm going to draw out the autonomic nervous system. I'm going to draw out the somatic sensory and somatic motor system so you can see how they compare and contrast. And maybe even tomorrow, I will throw in a reflex arc so you guys can begin to distinguish between each of these. Okay.
What figure is?
Yeah, Catherine?
I have the 13th edition of the book, so it's not on page 561 for me. So what figure
So
is
that's
this?
15, it's table 15.3, I mean 16.3, I believe, right? Can anybody verify that?
Yeah.
Yep, cool.
Mm.
16.3, correct. Okay, cool. Any questions? Yeah, go ahead.
I'm so sorry. It's not a question. It's just me saying
It's
sorry.
It's a comment about New York again?
No, I mean, I'm just sorry. That's all.
For what? Generalized guilt. You know, that's something to take up with your therapist. Leave that out of class, okay? Okay, cool. Okay, I will see you guys bright and early tomorrow, 8 a.m. So people notice I put up the lab separations. Group 1 and Group 2 are up there. If any modifications have to occur, please let me know. They're up on Blackboard. Okay, I know people. I tried to accommodate those requests from individuals who had to travel or something like that. But if I got it wrong, please let me know, because I can only have so many people inside a room at a time. Okay. Well, goodbye.
We've actually never been to the college.
Where do you live? Like Saskatchewan? Canada. Oh, Canada!
Back to Canada. Canada, Boston again.
Exactly.
No, I live in Bridgeport.
Yeah, okay, so 95 to exit 13 or 14. It's going to be a series of rights and lefts. You can't miss it. It actually almost looks bucolic compared to most things inside.
Yeah, well, I was going to use, Apple directions, but I meant like when I actually get to the college. Like,
yeah, we're in the Health Life Science building. So you can walk in any door. There'll be a security guard there. Make sure you bring your own pens, by the way. They want you to use your own pen to sign in. But I'll go over all of this stuff on Friday. Okay? But yeah, so you're going to see when you actually look at, if you go to Google Maps or something like that, depending upon the year of the map, there's a Health, Life, and Science building that's towards the river, okay? And you go to the back of the building, you'll use that door. We're up on the 3rd floor, the 2nd floor, whichever way you want to look at it. And we actually are in room 212, I believe.
Okay.
That's
Is that the same one as last semester?
No, it's not. We're in a completely different space. That's
Okay.
yeah, keeping you guys away from everybody else.
But is it East Campus or West Campus? Because I went to check it out and there's like 2 separate sides.
It's West Campus. So now, and then once you're on the West Campus, drive behind that, Nicole, and you're going to see the sort of newer building. Okay, and that's the Health and Life Science Center, and you go inside there. We're up on the top floor. Okay.
Kick ass.
Exactly. Getting closer, folks. We're almost done. Tomorrow we will finish the motor pathway, and then we move on to 17, which I use for review for the final exam. So
test 3 or test 4 is just going to be 15, 16, 17.
You got it, dude.
All right. I'll get cracking.
You better. Okay. Au revoir, les enfants. Au revoir. I'll see you guys tomorrow.
See you later.